Hello, my name's Aviva, and today I have some sports romance recommendations for you. So this past year, I found a lot of niches in the romance genre, and one of those little niches happened to have been sports romances. I'm officially obsessed, and I wanted to share with you all of the ones that I found this year that I really enjoyed. If you're not really familiar with sports romances, all it really is that one of the characters is like a pro something player. Maybe it's hockey or football or soccer, something like that, and that little fact kind of just drives the story in a very like sports romance sort of way. But before we get into the recs, I just wanted to give a quick shout out to Birthday Co, who were so nice enough to send me this candle that has my birthday on it. They kind of like personalize candles based off of your birthday. Like they do all of like this horoscope stuff and they choose the scents based off of like your birthday. It's really, really cool. And basically, if you were looking for a good holiday gift, I think this would be a great one. And you can use my code, it's Aviva10, and basically you'll save some money on your order. I'll also make sure to have a link in the description below where you can check out their website, learn all about their product. It's a really cool thing. I highly recommend checking them out. So first up, I wanted to share with you the book that started it all, which is The Deal by Elle Kennedy. This is the first book in the Off-Campus series. There are 4 books in this series, and then you can read even more in the Briar U series where there are 4 more books. And all 8 of these books are basically a companion series. In each book, you're basically following a new romance, even though you get to meet everybody in all of the books. So you read the first book, you get to meet the couple, you get to meet a bunch of people, and then one of the people that you met in book 1 basically get their own romance in book 2, and then it keeps following that way. So they kind of build on top of each other, and I definitely recommend reading them in order. Also because the first one in the series, which is The Deal, is actually my favorite. So there's no reason not to start with book 1, see how much you like it, and then keep going from there. But basically, these are just college hockey romance books. You're following these 4 players. They each get their own book and they live together in this house off campus, and they're all part of the college hockey team. And you basically get to follow them as, they're doing stuff in their life in college, and, they basically meet a girl and they have a romance with her. It is really fun. And if you are into like the college new adult hockey romance vibe, then this is definitely one for you. This is what started my sports romance journey, and I literally will be forever grateful. Next up, I have another companion series, which is the All Saints High series. So I'm holding up the first book, which is Pretty Reckless, but then there are 2 more books that come after this. It's Broken Night and then Angry God. And these are basically high school football romances. So this is technically a spin-off series to the Sinner of Saints series, which I happen to be a massive fan of. Like, I totally recommend reading the Sinner of Saints series, but that is basically following like adults, and it has nothing to do with sports romances. But basically, if you've read that and then you want to continue on in the world, you can basically read about the children from the couples that you met in the Sinner of Saints series in the All Saints High series. And basically all of these people are like in their senior year of high school, or like they're just out of high school, like that sort of age group. And basically when they were in high school slash like, for the books that take place in high school, they were football players, and you're basically following their romance. So it's a really fun series, especially if you are a fan of the Sinner of Saints series, because you basically get to see like the adults living their life, but then you also get to see the children and their romances, and it's just really adorable. So yeah, that's this one. I'm sorry, I also forgot to tell you what each book is actually about. So I'm just gonna be really quick about it because it's kind of hard to explain it without knowing like the backstory of Sinner of Saints and how each kid came to be in this world sort of thing. But basically, book 1, Pretty Reckless, is a bully romance. Book 2, which is Broken Night, is a childhood best friends romance. And then the third book, which is Angry Gods, is an enemies to lovers. So those are some really fun tropes. If you are into any of them, I recommend checking this series out. Next, I have another companion series, which is the Dirty Air series by Lauren Asher. So I'm holding up the first book, which is Throttled, but there are 3 more books that come after this. And this series is basically following Formula One race car drivers. It is a ton of freaking fun. These are dual POV. I mean, happens to be all of the books that I've mentioned already. The Off-Campus and the All Saints High series, those are dual POV also, which is always a good time. I really enjoy knowing that fact, so I felt like I should mention it. But basically, Dirty Air series, Formula One race car drivers, these are a ton of fun. You're following these characters that are basically just, doing the rounds of the Formula One, thing, whatever you want to call it, like, they're going from race to race and they're eventually all going to have their own romance. And each book in this series like builds on top of each other. Like you read book one and then you saw a romance happening in book one on the sidelines, and then that romance is going to happen in its forefront like in book two, and then it just like keeps going from there. It's a lot of fun. Race car drivers, I've never read something like this. I definitely recommend it. Next up, I have The Wall of Winnipeg by Mariana Zapata. So this is a very large book, and it is also a very slow burn. If you do not have patience for the romance aspect of a story, I don't necessarily recommend reading this. You really got to go into it knowing that you are going to be reading like 500 pages and not a single kiss is going to happen, but yet it will somehow so be worth it by the end. So now that I've warned that, because I don't want anybody to complain afterwards being like, oh, that was way too slow for me. This book is amazing. It was probably one of my favorites from the year. This is a football romance. So you're following basically this girl who has been working for this professional football player for like 2 years, and she absolutely hates her job because the guy that she's working for is literally like the epitome of a grump, and she really doesn't like him, doesn't get along with him, and basically one day she decides that she is finally going to quit her job and start something on her own. She wanted to like start a graphic design company, so she finally decides to go and do it. And then like a month later, the guy comes crawling back to her being like, I need you. You have to come back. I can't live without you, sort of thing. And then it's going to take off from there, and it's going to go in a direction that I personally didn't see coming when I originally read it. But basically, this book is amazing. I can't even begin to explain how amazing the slow burn is. Like, I didn't think I was going to be a fan of a slow burn romance until I started reading Mariana Zapata, and then I realized that like all other books in the world sometimes happen way too quickly. So I'm not saying that this is like the perfect recipe for a book, because sometimes it does test my patience, but it is always so worth it in the end that I just highly recommend reading it. And I have one more Mariana Zapata recommendation, which is Occulty. And I don't know if I like Occulty or Winnie more. They're both amazing in their own way. Like one's football, one's soccer. How do you choose? They're both great. But basically, Occulty, a soccer romance. You're following this girl who her whole life she has looked up to this pro soccer player. Like he's the reason why she became a pro player herself. And anyway, now she's an adult. She's playing on this pro team, and her team gets a new coach. And who do you know it happens to be? This guy that she's looked up to her entire life. And then the second that she meets him, she realizes that she doesn't actually like his personality. He's a huge grump. He's not really fun to be around. And basically she's now forced to be around him because he is her new coach. And they end up forming this like unlikely friendship, and then a romance is obviously going to bloom from there. So it is really good. Again, it is really slow though, but it will be so worth it in the end. Next up, I have Scoring Wilder by R.S. Gray, which happens to be very similar to the Mariana Zapata Occulty book, except this is more of like a normal romance. It's not like a slow burn or anything, but the topics of the story happen to be very similar. You're basically following this girl. She is currently the rookie of the year, and she is playing on a college team. And her team happens to get a new coach for the season who happens to be a pro player. Like he's a few years older than her, and like he basically needed to like help his reputation. So he decided to volunteer for the season and help out this women's team. And basically they're going to end up having a forbidden romance because, he's the coach and she's the player, and they can't really be together, but they're very attracted to each other. So they end up having a romance. It's a really fun time. I actually read this one before I read Occulty, and I thought this book was like an easy 5 stars. And then I read Occulty, and because it was super similar, I had to compare the two. And I thought that Occulty was better, except like you're dealing with a 5-star read with like a 6-star read, not like an okay read and then like a good read. Like this was 5 stars, and then Occulty was just like next level perfection. But basically, if you enjoyed Occulty, or if you like soccer romances, then I very much recommend this one. It was really good. Can't say anything else than that. Next up, I have Enemies by Tejan, which I absolutely loved. I mean, I loved all these recs, but like this one is one of my favorites. It's basically an enemies to lovers football romance. You're following this girl who just went to a college out of state, and happens to be, she doesn't know anybody there besides for this one guy who happens to be a pro player in the same state as her, because they kind of grew up together. Like they were best friends when they were children, and then, they hit puberty, they started to hate each other, and they haven't talked in years. And now that they're both living in the same state, their parents are like, here are each other's phone numbers, catch up, get to know each other. You don't know anybody else where you're living besides for them too. And they're both like, I don't really want to talk to her. I don't really want to talk to him. Let's not do that. And then basically something ends up happening in her life, and nobody could get a hold of her. So he's basically the one that tracks her down, delivers the news, and then the story goes from there. So this one is a great time. Enemies to lovers, sports romance. what more can you ask for? Next up, I wanted to share Run Away With Me by Mila Gray. So this is technically the third book in a 5-book companion series by Mila Gray called the Come Back to Me series, except that series in general is like a military-based romances, and this is a hockey romance, and I never understood its connection to the rest of the series, but I thought that I should just mention that technically this is part of a companion series, even though I don't understand its connection to it because I was never able to find, like the matching pieces or anything like that. But my point is that this is a hockey romance, and it's also a second chance romance. So I want to say that there are trigger warnings for sexual assault and things along those lines in this book. So, go into it knowing that and like being wary if that's something you have to look out for. But basically this book, you're following these two people, and when they were children, they were both on the hockey team together. They were best friends. No one could pull them apart. And then something happens, and this guy ends up leaving town and never calling her again. And now it's like 10 years later, and she's still really pissed that her best friend just like went up and left and she never heard from him again. And he happens to now be a pro hockey player, and she had quit hockey when he had left when they were kids. And basically he comes back into town and he's like, I really want to talk to you. I want to be friends again. Like, I can't stop thinking about you, everything like that. And she's like, who the hell do you think you are coming back to me like 10 years later? I don't want to see you. I don't want to talk to you. And then you're just going to like follow the story from there of like him chasing after her. And obviously a romance is going to bloom. So it's like a second chance romance. It's like a childhood best friends to enemies romance. But then it is also a hockey romance because they both played hockey when they were children. But then also he is now a pro hockey player, and that definitely plays a role in the book. So basically, I highly recommend it. I absolutely loved this book. I love the entire series, but this is the only one that happens to be a sports romance. So I recommend reading this one, and if you like it, then just know that there are more that technically are very similar to it in the vibe. Like, all of them have very similar vibes, romances, even though the topics are different. But basically, whatever. Let's not get off topic. I just recommend this one a lot. That's all. Next, I have Make It Sweet by Kristen Callahan. So this is a sports romance only because the main guy is a ex-hockey player. Like, the story starts off where he recently got injured and he basically has to stop playing hockey or else, like, he could kill himself, sort of thing. And then you're following this girl who happens to be like a very famous actress, and she just got kicked off of her show. And also she found out that her boyfriend, who happens to be a pro football player, has been cheating on her. So she kind of like freaks out and goes to this, resort to kind of like calm down, get away from everything. And that is where she meets this guy who happens to be an ex-hockey player because his grandmother owns this retreat, and basically he's living on the property, and they're gonna end up like, keep on crossing paths, sort of thing. But they're both like dealing with their own crap in their lives because, like, he just had to quit his job, and she is like, taking a breather and stuff like that. And this story is kind of going to go from there. They're obviously going to have a romance. So this one isn't so necessarily heavy on the sports romance because, like, he's only an ex-hockey player. So he has those vibes going on with him, but he's trying to figure out, like, what else he should do with his life. Like, should he go back and play hockey because, that's what he really wants to do, even though it could kill him, and, like, stuff like that. So this is a bit on, like, the lesser side of a hockey sports romance, but it still does have that vibe because he is still a pro athlete, sort of thing. So whatever. Anyway, I feel like I didn't explain this book very well, but all I'm going to say is that I recommend reading it. It was really good. It's a really steamy romance. Just take my word for it. Next up, I wanted to recommend Not My Match by Isle Madam Mills. So this is technically the second book in a companion series. There's a first book called Not My Romeo, which is a football romance also, except I haven't read that one yet, so I can't really tell you what it's about. But this book is basically following a pro football player who happens to have a best friend who got married in the first book. Like, you get to see his best friend's romance happen first, and then, this one happens. But basically, in this book, you follow this guy who ends up taking in his best friend's wife's sister to live with him after her place burned down. And then you're gonna follow their romance as she basically starts dating a bunch of people that like end up not working out very well because like she just wants to find somebody new, and like he's kind of like, living with her and being like, well, you could have dated me, sort of thing, whatever. I don't know. Basically, it's a very cute romance. I very much enjoyed it, but I think I would have enjoyed it more if I would have read the first book from the duet because I feel like their romance that happened happened in this book kind of started in book 1 and I just like missed some stuff sort of thing, you know, but it's okay. It was still really good nonetheless. But if you do plan to read this one, I kind of somewhat recommend reading Not My Romeo first because I think it would make this one better. But my point is that I'm not sure if I explained what this book was about very well, but basically it is a sports romance because the guy is a pro football player and I just recommend reading it. And before I end this video, I wanted to just quickly mention 4 books that I personally didn't love, but if you are like crazy for sports romances and you want some more recommendations, even though these aren't really recommendations from me because I personally didn't like these books, but obviously everybody has their own taste in books and like everybody's looking for something else. So even though I didn't enjoy them, you might absolutely love this book. Like I know that some people really love all the books I'm about to mention. I just wanted to like point out there that these books didn't so much work for me, but they might work for you. So, you know, take the recommendation half-heartedly. But basically, I wanted to recommend Pucked by Helena Hunting, which is the first book in a hockey romance companion series. In this book, you're following this guy that, you know, ends up having a one-night stand with a girl and then kind of like falls for her and wants like a real relationship with her. But her brother is on the same team as him and, you know, she just doesn't want to like get involved sort of thing. And then he like chases after her throughout the whole book. And it's like, whatever, that sort of storyline. Why I didn't love this book though was because it was a little bit too steamy for me. And then it like lacked a plot development. So like, I wouldn't mind the steam if it had a lot of good like angst and tension and build up to like go along with it. But, you know, whatever. Everybody's picky. That's what I was picky about for this book. I didn't love it because of that. But if you're looking for a really steamy hockey romance that has like a ton of really explicit sex scenes and you don't really care for like, you know, such a good buildup of a plot, then like you might like this one. I also have Playing for Keeps by Kendall Ryan, which I felt the same way about this one as I did about Puck by Helena Hunting. It was a little bit too steamy for me, and then there wasn't like a good enough plot buildup sort of thing. This is a brother's best friend's romance, and it kind of starts out where, you know, this girl ends up sleeping with her brother's best friend. They have a one-night stand, and then they kind of just want to keep sleeping together and have a relationship after they finally get into bed with each other because they both liked each other like their whole lives, but they've always stayed away from each other because of the brother sort of thing, you know? And then you're kind of following the story as, you know, they're hiding it from the brother and stuff like that. It's pretty basic. It was fun, but again, it was just a little bit not good of a build-up, like, you know, mentally for me, and it was just a little bit too much steam for me, but it was still like, you know, a fine time, and obviously not everybody has the same exact taste as me, so I wanted to mention it, you know, in case you're looking for another pro hockey player sort of romance, and, you know, everything that I just said isn't going to bother you in a book. But basically, if you end up reading this and you do enjoy it, just know that it is the first book in a companion series that I'm pretty sure like 6 or 7 books are out from it by now. So basically, if you end up enjoying it, there are a lot more that you could read that will be similar. And then the last 2 books that I am somewhat mentioning, not necessarily, you know, recommending, is going to be Shameless King and then The Perfect First, both by Maya Hughes. So my issue with both of these books were that they were super mediocre, so mediocre to the point that I seriously can't even remember what they were about. I know that they're college hockey romances. They're both like first books in a companion series, and I read both of them because people were like, oh, if you liked Off Campus, you should check out these series because, you know, they're very similar. I happen to think that Off Campus was better, and I rather do a reread of Off Campus before bothering, you know, with reading some of these because they're just like worse versions of it. But again, not everybody has my taste in books. You might absolutely love these books for some like odd reason, and, you know, that's why I wanted to mention it in case, you know, maybe you read every single book that I already mentioned in this recommendation video and you needed something else to look up. So you could look these up. I'm not necessarily recommending them, but I did read them this year. They are sports romances and they might work for you, even though they didn't work for me. So that's that. But anyway, that is all of these sports romances that I have to share with you today. I'm curious to know if you read any of these books before, or what did you think about them? Did you enjoy them? Did you not enjoy them? Do you plan to add any of them to your TBR? Let me know down in the comment section below. Also, if you have any recommendations for me, specifically sports romances that I did not, you know, mention in this video, then leave me a comment also because I'm always looking for a good recs. But anyway, if you enjoyed this video, please give it a thumbs up. If you're not currently subscribed to my channel, please hit that subscribe button. And anyway, thank you so much for watching, and until next time, enjoy reading.